Agriculture. It is a practice that most people would expect to find in rural areas with wide open fields. Few would associate it with the city, yet there are literally millions of people who cultivate food in the urban environment, ranging from individuals who have small allotments for recreational purposes to large-scale commercial enterprises who sometimes own multiple hectares of farming land within the city. The Food and Agriculture Organization estimates that there are 800 million people worldwide who actively practice urban agriculture, of which 200 million people produce for commercial purposes. The phenomenon urban agriculture emerged with the formation of the first urban settlements. More recently, urban agriculture has been thriving in Cuba at a level that is unparalleled by any other nation in the history of mankind. Why Cuba? What does it mean for Cuba? In a world where there is always a threat of food scarcity, urban agriculture seems to offer a possible solution. How does urban agriculture in Cuba relate to agriculture in the Netherlands? In Havana, half the vegetables sold in the city are cultivated within the city. This is far more than any other city in the world, making Cuba the leader in urban agriculture. Countries around the world, including the Netherlands, are now starting to adopt a similar model, while Cuba's wide practice of urban agriculture has been around for 25 years. The first driving force behind the emergence of urban agriculture in Cuba was food security. Prior to the fall of the Berlin Wall in 1989, Cuba had been very dependent on the Soviet Union for food, fertilizer and oil, which it imported at a relatively low price. With the fall of the Soviet Union, a period of food insecurity began. In 1992, the situation worsened when the U.S. Congress passed the Torricelli Act, which sharpened the economic embargo of the U.S. on Cuba by cutting off almost all food and medicine shipped to Cuba. This measure was taken to make it harder for Cuba to enter the global market, with the ultimate goal the paralysis of the Cuban economy and the collapse of communism in Cuba. In reaction to these events, the Cuban government made extra land available within and around its cities for agricultural purposes. City dwellers could now grow and harvest their own food on a relatively large scale, thus combating the threat of a potential food crisis. The Cuban government's development policy was the second driving force. In response to the threat of a food crisis, it set up the Urban Agriculture Department in 1994. This department supported the development of urban agriculture by supplying the necessary services and goods and researched the possibilities for urban agriculture. Some Cuban cities, including Havana, were redesigned from the ground up to accommodate for this new practice. Plants and bushes were replaced with chicken coops, and empty parcels were filled with agricultural crops. Lastly, the need for environmental sustainability has been a driving force for the emergence of urban agriculture in Cuba. It provided an alternative to dumping waste on landfill sites by recycling plant-based, livestock and industrial byproducts in the form of compost. This led to a decrease in the amount of waste on these landfill sites and turned land that was previously polluted with toxic garbage into relatively clean and sustainable agricultural land. The compost also compensated for the lack of fertilizer resulting from the demise of the Soviet Union. A direct consequence of the spreading of urban agriculture in Cuba was the qualitative improvement of the environment. In several cities like Havana, the use of pesticides within the city is prohibited. As a result, all agricultural products produced by the city are grown organically, thus avoiding air and water pollution. Likewise, a relatively large part of the 1,400 tons of waste that Havana produces daily is turned into compost. Besides solid waste, effluent is recycled by using it as water for agricultural crops. Secondly, urban agriculture has led to an influx of jobs on the Cuban labor market, which has lowered the unemployment rate, which had been increasing since the crisis in 1989. The Cuban government estimates that approximately 117,000 people are working in this new sector, and almost 26,500 people work in related sectors. In 1998, urban agriculture accounted for 6 to 7% of all new jobs in Cuba. Moreover, the income of people who work in urban agriculture is above the national average. Thirdly, the quality, availability and security of food have improved. The rise of urban agriculture made Havana one of Cuba's biggest producers of vegetables, which made city dwellers less dependent on external food suppliers. The accessibility of food improved as prices dropped, as a result of the absence of most of the transport and storage costs. Freshness was also improved, because the food found its way to the consumer faster. In general, the practice of urban agriculture seems to have been beneficial to Cuba. How does the Netherlands relate to these developments?
Tot 1850 waren stad en landbouw met elkaar verbonden. Was stadslandbouw de normaalste zaak van de wereld. Dat is in de 150 jaar daarna is het eigenlijk steeds meer uit elkaar gegroeid. En nu zie je eigenlijk weer een soort beweging terug, waarin weer gezocht wordt om verschillende redenen dat we ook lokaal met landbouw bezig zijn.
The first driving force was the increasing alienation of the way food is produced, especially among city dwellers.
In de 19e eeuw zijn er een paar belangrijke revoluties. Je kon van ver voedsel binnenhalen, omdat het gevroren was, diepgevroren of gekoeld was. De landbouw had de arbeidskracht die in de stad zat niet meer nodig, want er waren steeds meer machines die het konden opvangen. De landbouw had de afvalstoffen uit de stad niet meer nodig, die ze gebruikten bijvoorbeeld om het land vruchtbaar te maken. Hadden ze niet meer nodig, want er was kunstmest. Dat is dus eigenlijk de basis geweest van steeds meer uit elkaar groeien van de landbouw. Tot ver in deze eeuw. Wat je nu de laatste tijd ziet als een tegenbeweging van de globalisering van ons voedsel. Dat mensen die zich meer bewust worden van waar komt ons eten vandaan, weer verbonden willen worden. En dat geheel van die beweging, zeg maar, de focus meer op lokaal voedsel, daar valt stadslandbouw binnen. Dat de steden zich een nieuwe weg gaan zoeken. Van hoe gaan we hiermee om met deze nieuwe vraag? Hoe kunnen we ruimte bieden aan dit initiatief? Want ze zien wel dat de kracht achter dit initiatief heel sterk is. Mensen willen dit, veel stedelingen willen dit, zoeken nieuwe wegen om weer in verbinding te komen met voedsel.
The second driving force was the city's need for a green image. In an increasingly globalizing and networking world, municipalities are growing more concerned with their own image in order to attract tourists, enterprises and citizens who stimulate the local economy. In addition, the geopolitical debate of the last decades has shifted more and more towards environmental issues, mainly caused by the studies on global warming. This has led to national and international pressure on all levels of government to enforce development policies for more sustainable and self-sufficient cities. Urban agriculture contributes to the green image of the city, and greenness has become an important aspect of city branding, along with other key selling points such as local culture, history and diversity. The last and more recent driving force of urban agriculture in the Netherlands was the global economic crisis of 2007. The economic collapse led to stagnation in sales in the Dutch housing market and was especially detrimental to the market for newly built houses, resulting in a high vacancy rate. Furthermore, a significantly high rate of development plans for new houses was postponed or cancelled, causing building ground to remain empty. This led municipalities and private parties to fill empty building grounds with crops and to use vacant dwellings as greenhouses, thus minimizing their losses and contributing to the green image of the city. A first potential consequence of urban agriculture is the reinforcement of the social cohesion within a neighborhood.
We zien ook dat het samen telen van voedsel een hele belangrijke toegevoegde waarde geeft aan wijken. Het verbindt mensen hier, daar waar wijken vroeger niet echt, mensen in de wijken niet met elkaar verbonden waren.
Another consequence is a reduction in fuel consumption. As the world slowly runs out of oil, current global transportation systems become unsustainable by either reducing or entirely cutting out motorized transportation of food. Urban agriculture offers a sustainable and inexpensive alternative to long globalized food supply chains. Driving forces between urban agriculture in Cuba and the Netherlands seem to be very different. Although the scale on which urban agriculture is practiced greatly differs between both countries, the results yielded have mostly been the same. Will the Netherlands follow Cuba's footsteps? Probably not to the same extent, but in coming decades, urban agriculture is sure to grow.